Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Utah Valley University. I'm Matthew Holland, president of this institution, and it's an honor for me to welcome you to our campus and especially to welcome our distinguished guests. This is the annual Orrin Hatch Economic Forum, the third such forum that we've held on this campus. Each one has been a very stimulating, very informative session, and this one will prove to be the same, I have no doubt. It's a great honor for us to have Sen Hatch here. We will be introducing him formally in just a moment, and he in turn will be introducing our other very special guest that it's a privilege to have here on our campus. I want to thank the Center for Ethics under the leadership of David Keller, and also Elaine Engelhardt, our representative for federal relations, who have worked together to help organize this event and do the planning. And also want to thank Sen Hatch's office and staff, who are always so professional and superb to work with. Just so you are aware, after we do the introductions, and there will be a panel discussion between our guests, we will have a Q&A session with questions submitted. I think many of you may have noticed the opportunity to submit questions as you came in. We obviously won't be able to respond to all questions, but want to have as much input as we can. If the senator's staff is here, if they'll raise their hands, they will take additional questions during the hour that can be submitted to the end. So right here up front, if you have a question you'd like to submit, please bring down here to the front, and those will be processed for addressing later in the hour. Today's topic is America's Fiscal Future, Tax and Entitlement Reform. I can't think of a more timely topic as we watch the events that have been unfolding on the national and international scale with respect to the economy and decisions that have been made and need to be made. And we have three of the nation's leading, not just experts, but also actors on this important stage. As some of you know, I recently wrote an editorial for the Deseret News arguing that the escalating costs of Medicaid were putting increasing pressures on funding for education among other state agencies. This is not just an issue of national and global significance, it's an issue that directly affects the vitality and the future of Utah Valley University if we are not able to do something about entitlement and debt, the kinds of spending that we are facing as a country. And so I ask the university guests who are here, our students and faculty, to give their utmost attention to this issue. Today's discussion will be informative, it will be lively, it will be, for me, I believe, reminiscent of important conversations of the founders. We had a breakfast with some of the guests before, and I made reference to an important exchange between Jefferson and Madison, who got really intensely interested in this issue about how much the federal government could and should spend, how much debt could be passed on to future generations. They didn't exactly agree eye to eye on everything, but they were both fundamentally committed that this had to be brought under control in some ways so that freedom could be enjoyed not just by the current generation, but could be passed on to future generations. And we look forward to a conversation today very much in that spirit. I'd now like to turn some time over to David Winder to introduce Senator Hatch. In turn, Senator Hatch will introduce our other guests and then launch into the panel discussion, which will last until about 11:10. We'll then take 20 minutes of questions or so. At the end of that hour, we will break. Senator Hatch will need to, and his guests will need to attend a press conference, and then a reception will be held after that. We'll give you the details at the end of the hour. But those are along the lines that we will proceed this morning. With this, I turn some time over to David Winder. He is the chair of our Ethics Center Community Advisory Board, and in his previous professional life for 7 years headed up community and economic development in Governor Michael O'Levitt's administration. David Winder.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and it's really a pleasure for me to be here to introduce Senator Orrin Hatch. Orrin Hatch is serving his 6th term as the United States Senator for Utah. He's a member of several important committees in the Senate, including Senate Health, Labor, Pensions, and Education Committee, the Judiciary Committee, the Special Committee on Aging, the Joint Committee on Taxation, and is the ranking member of the Senate Finance Committee, the committee that is responsible for overseeing 60% of the federal budget, including Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, as well as all tax policy and international trade agreements. Senator Hatch is the leading advocate for policies to encourage savings and investment, such as the Capital Formation Act of 1997 and the Research and Tax Credit Act, and that he has consistently fought for lower taxes as a means for spurring long-term economic growth. In addition, he's fought for a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution for years and has come closer than any other member of Congress in getting it passed. In his role on the Finance Committee, he's already working hard to incorporate the strong Utah values of living within our means, fairness, and pro-growth, putting the private sector in charge when tackling both reform as well as reforming our nation's entitlement system. It's a pleasure to introduce Senator Hatch today, who along with his colleagues will be working together to make sure that a fundamental fiscal reform becomes a reality in the not too distant future. But let me first just say something about my personal experience with the senator. Senator Hatch has dignity in his bearing, and all of us notice that. He's a true statesman. But at the same time, he is a warm human being, congenial and personal. And I think any of you who approach him to say hello, you'll find that out. He has stature, and we kind of look up to him, but he's very personable and congenial, and he likes to talk with people. He loves his constituents. Some years ago, I worked with him just briefly as he helped us recruit a conductor for the Utah Symphony. Now, that's not necessarily a senator's job, but he's so well connected and he's so well known that he can help people throughout the state with some of these so-called more little matters. Also, one time he and I were on a radio show together, and the MC, and we were talking about improving Utah's economy. And then the whole conversation kind of switched over because the person who was the MC of the show wanted the senator to talk about his songs that he composes. And he composes some really great music that's very listenable. And so not only is Senator Hatch a great statesman, but he's a great friend to all of his constituents here in Utah. Senator Hatch.
Well, thank you so much, Dave. It's so nice to be here on UVU's campus. I'm really very appreciative of your president and the job that he's doing here. We're very close, and we spend time together, and we're working very hard to try and help this great university to be as recognized as you really deserve to be. And he's a wonderful president and a wonderful friend. But I want to thank you all for coming here today. It is important that you're here. It's hard to pick up a paper these days without reading some lament about the prospects of America's future. But seeing so many concerned citizens, including young citizens, turning out for this event demonstrates to me the future of America remains bright. The issues we will discuss today are not just of passing interest. They are critical to the future of our country. Our national debt now stands at $14.6 trillion, going up every day. And the policy debates fired by this exploding debt do not involve ordinary political choices. This debt is forcing a long overdue debate over first principles as significant as any of the debates during the American founding, Reconstruction, or New Deal. How much government does the Constitution allow? Within those bounds, how much government is wise? And most importantly, how will taxpayers finance the level of government that they choose? Admiral Mike Mullen, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, recently stated, he said that the national debt is the biggest threat we have to our national security. This is not an exaggeration. Today, our total debt, as I've said, is $14.6 trillion. That is 97% of the gross domestic product. This level of debt acts as a drag on economic growth, job creation, and of course tax revenues. It also crowds out legitimate government functions such as national defense, as interest payments on that debt take up more and more of our federal budget. The downgrade of the nation's credit rating is largely due to the lack of confidence in Washington, or that Washington will get its debt under control. And the result of this downgrade will be increased costs of borrowing for anyone looking to buy a home, start or expand a business, or pay for college. That's simply unacceptable. Politicians need to be straight with the American people. With regard to that, you have two of the straightest right here today who are going to really talk turkey with you. The President suggests that all we need is more shared sacrifice by the rich. But the income tax cannot get much more progressive. The top 1% of income earners paid 38% of all federal income taxes in 2008, and the top 10% of all earners paid 70% of all federal income taxes. 51% of American households pay no federal income tax, and 30% of American households actually make money from the federal income tax system. Every one of you are going to be paying for all that. We expect you all to be successful out of this great university. Paying our way to a balanced budget at this level of government spending is really not possible if we keep doing this. So what are we to do? Since we have a government spending problem, I believe that we must begin by addressing the health and retirement spending programs that are central to this problem. The first thing that we need to do is repeal President Obama's health care law. With over $2.6 trillion in spending on a new health care entitlement, partially paid for by raiding an already bankrupt Medicare Advantage entitlement by over $500 billion they took out of that, and by leveling over $1 trillion in new taxes and penalties, the first step towards entitlement and tax reform is, in my opinion, the repeal of Obamacare. Thank you. Second, we need to come clean about the demographic problems that our health and retirement programs face. In a recent article in the Journal of National Affairs, Avik Roy highlighted these problems in the Medicare program. Most people become Medicare eligible at age 65. In 1965, when Medicare was enacted, average life expectancy was roughly 70 years. Yet by 2010, it had risen to 78 years. In other words, Medicare used to pay for health care in the last 5 years of life. Today, it pays for health care in the last 13 years of life. And that's going up all the time as we become more healthy and longer living. Moreover, the number of people eligible for Medicare is exploding. Today, there are 47 million people on Medicare. In 2030, when the last of the baby boomers retire, there will be 77 million on Medicare. At the same time, the number of current workers paying for the benefits of current retirees is declining. And when the program was created, there were 4 workers for every retiree. In 2030, there'll be 2.3 workers for every retiree. Similar demographic problems exist for Social Security. Many more retirees living much longer with fewer current workers to foot the bill. The President suggests that we can fix this problem through what he calls a balanced approach, by which he means that's a code word for tax increases. I disagree. We cannot fill the deficit hole and shrink the debt by raising taxes. Even if we completely repealed all of the Bush tax relief, raising taxes on all American families, our debt would still be going up due to the rising costs of Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Raising taxes on the risk takers and families will create the wealth of this nation in the 21st century in order to pay for a level of government designed in the 1930s and 1960s. And that's not only unjust, it's also bad economic policy that would fail to resolve our debt crisis and possibly make it much worse. Now, we're fortunate here today to have 2 of my friends who've come all the way from Washington, D.C., and in the case of Dave Camp, from Michigan as well. We're fortunate to have them joined with us today, and they both are at the center, and will be at the center, of the coming debates on tax and entitlement reforms. My friend Dave Camp on your right over there, is a congressman from Michigan. He's not just a congressman, he's chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, where all money bills have to originate. This committee is the most powerful committee in the House of Representatives, responsible for tax, trade, and Medicare policy. I'm very pleased to be working with him to set the stage for tax reform that broadens the base and lowers tax rates for families and businesses. We have a great partnership. Neither of us is afraid to walk across the hill and meet with the other, and we've both done that, and we're going to continue to do it. Together, I expect that we will be able to secure meaningful entitlement reform that hopefully will get our debt under control. Now, our moderator today, sitting in the middle between the two of us, is Dr. Douglas Holtz-Eakin. As the former director of the Congressional Budget Office, that's a very, very important position in Washington. The Congressional Budget Office is Congress's nonpartisan scorekeeper, and he's known for his nonpartisan work. He knows a thing or two about tax, health, and retirement policy. We could not ask for a better person to guide this discussion. The President is currently working on a plan for job creation. Now, our guests today understand that the most important things Washington could do to revive our economy and create jobs would be tax and entitlement reform. Now, I want to thank all of you for attending today. I look forward to a fruitful discussion, and I believe you'll enjoy my two partners and friends here today who've traveled all this distance just to be here at UVU and to discuss these important matters with you. So with that, we'll turn the time over to our moderator, Dr. Douglas Holtz-Eakin.
Welcome. Let me take the moderator's prerogative and say a couple things. First, thank you for the generous introduction, and I'm delighted to be joined on the stage by Chairman Camp. Second, it's wonderful to be back at UVU. I was able to be in this auditorium 2 years ago. It was a spectacular event, and I'm pleased to be here for another opportunity. And third, I just want to say that I do feel directly challenged by the university president. He promised you a lively discussion. I don't know if you noticed, this is an economics forum. I'm a PhD economist. So you've got a forum on the dismal science being led by a dismal scientist, and it has to be lively?
That's right.
Evidently, it's this adherence to high standards that has made this university what it is. We'll do what we can. So why don't we open it with today's news. And most people know that one of the signature events of each month is the Department of Labor announces that the unemployment rate for the previous month, the number of jobs created in the United States. It has been the focal point of most people's attention for several years now. Earlier today, there was a private sector company, a payroll processing company, that put out its estimate of what went on in the U.S. economy. And they said that 91,000 jobs were created last month. And so what I wanted to do is sort of get the reaction of Chairman Camp and Senator Hatch about those numbers, and then ask them both if they would just open with some remarks about the 4 or 5 things that they think it would be useful to do to get the economy going in the United States. So why don't we start with Chairman Camp?
Well, thanks a lot, Doug, and thank you for the invitation to be here, Senator Hatch and President Holland. Thank you very much for letting me come to UVU. It's a beautiful campus, beautiful university. It's great to be here. What Doug mentioned was this jobs report, and this comes out Friday, and there's this private company that analyzes the data. It doesn't always match what the official data is, so we have to wait really till Friday, but one of the trends that came out today was that of the job creation we had, they were estimating about 91,000 jobs created, which is up, that's good, but half of those were created in small business. And 97% were in small and medium business, which means that's where the job growth is. And this has been very important about, as we look at policies as we go forward, we don't want to do anything that closes off the ability of small businesses to grow and create jobs, because that is frankly where much of the recovery is going to come. And we obviously hope that small businesses grow to be larger businesses. Larger businesses, I think, have another set of issues which we can get into. But I do think in terms of the committee I'm on, Ways and Means, which really is the counterpart to the Finance Committee, and it is very helpful to have a partner like Senator Hatch on the other side of the Capitol that we can talk about issues, similar issues with each other about. But I think tax policy is one area that hopefully we can begin to grow our economy. If we can do fundamental tax reform, in my view, I look at in a revenue neutral way, not raising taxes, not lowering taxes, but reducing tax rates and broadening the base. We've had about 4,500 changes in the tax code in the last decade. That's about one a day. So the certainty is very difficult to predict. The complexity has gone way off the chart. 90% of small businesses hire preparers now, partly because they're afraid they're going to make a mistake. They're busy doing their business, but also the complexity has gotten to the point that you really can't do it yourself. Americans spend about 6 billion hours complying with the tax code. So clearly, both on a personal level and a business level and certainly the large company level, we need to look at our tax policy. And the second area I think we need to look very closely at, and this is in addition to the spending side, which Senator Hatch referred to, I do think we need to look at that, and I can get into that as we go along further. But the other area I think is to continue to grow and expand markets. We need to find where the economies are growing and sell into those markets. Jobs that are related to export pay 1.5 times more than jobs that aren't. It's a clear part of where we are as a world in terms of competing globally. So we need to adopt the 3 trade agreements that are pending. Other countries are much more aggressive in that area than we are. And what you don't want to do is lose that market share. And I had somebody in my office on another issue, but he was telling me about his import business of coffee. And I said, oh, well, that's obviously from South America. How is that going? And he said, oh, no, I'm not importing from South America. I had to go where I could find a new market that wasn't already locked up. He's importing coffee from Africa. So what we don't want to do is fall behind and lose those contacts and those avenues and those markets and have them be established with other countries. And certainly Europe, the European Union, and Canada are much more aggressive on this than we are. So those 3 trade agreements with Panama, Colombia, and South Korea are pending. If the president would send them to the Congress, I believe they would pass on a bipartisan vote. I think certainly showing that kind of support for an issue is important at this time. And those are just 2 areas that I think we need to do some work in.
Thank you. Senator Hatch?
Well, I agree with Dave Camp. Both of those areas are very, very important areas. And I agree with everything he said. Let me just add to it. I think we'd have to say that, well, let me just mention also the free trade agreements. We've been working on those now for, well, upwards of 7 years. The last 4 years they were completed. And those trade agreements are very, very important. It involves up to $14 billion in positive trade balance for us. Plus, these 3 countries are very important to us. Korea is a very good trading partner. They've had to work out labor union problems in order to get that Korean trade agreement done, but Korea acquiesced. And with regard to Colombia, that's the 3rd largest country in Central and South America, well, south of our country. Very, very important to us. You've had 2 courageous leaders down there, and President Uribe and then Santos, both of whom have cleaned up the country, gotten rid of a lot of the FARC, the terrorists, and have put that country back on its feet to a large degree. We want to support them. And by the way, they can come into the United States duty-free. When we go there, our people are at a disadvantage because there are tariffs that would be removed if we could pass this free trade agreement. Panama's long been a great friend of ours, and it's a center for finance today in this hemisphere. It's very, very important, and a lot of business transactions go on through Panama. It's very important for us. We're both working on that, and we're going to have to work our way through. But the president has to submit these agreements, and they've been brought up, these free trade agreements. They've been brought up pursuant to what is called the Trade Promotion Authority that expired in 2007. Now that allows you to bring these free trade agreements up quickly for a single vote. And frankly, we think we can pass both of those agreements. There are still some controversies among them, around them, but we need to do that and show that America is serious about trade. I think we've got to repeal Obamacare. Obamacare is going to be a lot more than $2.6 trillion. It is fouling up our health care system. I know that if this president is reelected, within a short period of time he'll throw his hands in the air and say it's not working, we got to go to a single payer system, which means we've got to go to a Washington, D.C. run system. federal government-run system. If we do that, we will never get health care under control, and it'll cost an arm and a leg the rest of our lives. So we do need to repeal that. Thirdly, I do think we need to repeal Dodd-Frank. I was down in a small town in Utah just a week ago. There's only one bank. The small town banker came to me and he said, "Senator, I don't know what to do." He said, "I tried to make a $9,000 loan to one of our constituents in this area. It was triple collateralized, which we really shouldn't have to require. And the administration sent in 9, he said, I only have 8 employees. They sent in 9 bureaucrats to review the loan. When they got through reviewing it, he said, was it okay? And they said, we don't know. Now, we can't run an economy that way. Banks are afraid to lend. They're afraid to participate, and that's in large measure because of the Dodd-Frank bill, which still only has thousands of pages of regulations, but still only has a few of the rules covered by regulations. So the banks are scared to death that they're going to run crosswise of the Dodd-Frank bill. I'm also convinced that we're going to have to pass a constitutional amendment to require a balanced budget. We came within 1 vote. I led the fight both times, in fact 13 times now since I've been in the Senate. And the second time was in 1997. I had 67 votes. The required number to pass a constitutional amendment as I walked to the floor to make the final arguments, and I was informed that one of our senators became frightened because of the unions in his state that said that they would destroy him if he did this, and he flipped on us, and we lost by 1 vote. You know, it was very, very disappointing. We had 66 votes. Had we passed that balanced budget amendment, we wouldn't be in this precarious situation today. We would have had some structure that would have forced people to have to live more within our means. And so those are things that I think we've got to do. There are a number of others, but I've taken long enough here, and I think, you know, Dave and I will be working on these together as long as we're both there. And I have to say, we couldn't have a better chairman of the Ways and Means Committee in the House of Representatives. We're great friends, and he is very thoughtful, very smart, and represents an industrial state in Michigan. And I just have to say that it's a pleasure to work with him, and I'm really honored to have you here today.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Well, let me interrupt the Love Fest to ask some follow-up questions here. When I talk about free trade, those who don't fall asleep immediately respond with 2 things. Number one, isn't this just a phrase that allows us to send our jobs offshore? And number 2, what's so good about free trade? It means that other countries violate the rules. How do you respond to those arguments?
Well, 2 things. One, I think if you looked a few years ago, people might not have thought we're in a global economy. I think now they do understand that we are, and that we are competing around the world, and that we want to sell our products around the world. And frankly, I'd like companies that are based in the U.S. selling around the world as well as in the United States. So I think we need to continue to make things here. We need to continue to sell. We need to continue to grow our economy. So this is one way to do it. But what those agreements allow us to do is have a structure to trade, because it is getting an advantage. That's what trade is. You're trying to have a better product or a more innovative product or doing a better job. You're trying to gain some advantage on your trading or who you're trading with to have your product or service be more attractive. So there's going to be this competition and this tension. But you need to have a structure to deal with that, and that's where I think these agreements are important to do. And when you look at where the world is going, Europe has 40 of these agreements pending. We have the 3. Canada, as I said, has concluded with Colombia and with Korea. The other point is Colombia is now on the UN Security Council. They're a huge export market for us in South America, and it is important to have those. And so it also is important to have enforcement. And enforcement comes with being able to actually have a structure to go back and say, from an administration to administration level, you know, this is our problem. And so you're going to have those. Just because you have an agreement, the problems don't stop. But frankly, without an agreement, as with China, there's no trade agreement with China, between China and the U.S., It's a very difficult relationship. It's very complex on many levels, but on the trade level, it's a very difficult one because of their currency problems, their not honoring intellectual property. In fact, the head of Microsoft was in my office and said they would double their profits in China if just the government stopped buying pirated software. So we do need to have ways of enforcing the commerce that is going to go on whether there's trade agreements or not. But I think it's better at a backdrop of having some structure and rule-based system of dealing with each other.
Senator, I wanted to follow up with you on the issue of tax reform. I mean, on the issue of tax reform. You've talked for years about the importance of tax reform, pro-growth tax reform, and as ranking member in finance, and certainly perhaps as the future chairman, that would be high on your agenda. One of the questions that the audience, I'm sure, is going to ask is, what do you think about some of the taxes that you hear floated? A flat tax or a value-added tax? What's your opinion of those?
Yeah, well, I have to say that there are a lot of good ideas out there, some of which I like a lot better than others. But I agree with Dave that we've got to reduce marginal tax rates, and then we've got to broaden the base. Just recently, I've been saying this for 2 years, and finally people are picking it up. When President Obama became president, the bottom 41% of all households did not pay income taxes. Guess where that is today, 2.5 years later after the Obama administration? It's 51%. Now, we should take care of the truly poor, there's no question about that, and we're capable of doing that. But you can't tell me that all 51% of households are truly poor. Now, clearly, people at a lower income level should not have to pay the taxes at those at a higher income level. And so, like Davis said, we usually have a triple set of brackets to take care of that. But we're going to have to lower tax rates, especially marginal rates, and spread the base, and get more people as part of the system, and more people to have some stake in the system by paying some taxes. Now, our corporate tax rate is the highest tax rate in the world. The only one higher is Japan, and they're changing theirs and lowering it. Now, having raised that point, we have $1 trillion+ overseas that are being held by multinational companies based here, who literally do a lot of business here, but they do a lot of business overseas. They're multinational. They are holding that money over there because if they bring it here, it's going to be taxed at the 35% highest tax rate. So they're waiting for some sort of a repatriation lower tax rate to bring that money back. All the rest of the world has what's called a territorial system. If you pay taxes in the foreign country as a business, you can bring that money home without being socked some more taxes. We've got to go to that system. Now, last time we brought more than $1 trillion back, we did it at a 5% tax rate, if I recall it right. That's right, Doug. And they were happy to bring it back at that kind of a rate. But that's not good policy, good tax policy, because very few corporations pay a full 35% because there are tax expenditures and other things that bring their rates down. But that's true in all other lands too, or almost all other lands. If we go to a territorial system, we would be bringing this money home all the time. It would be helping our industrial states. It would be helping states like Utah. Utah is the only state in the union that has doubled its exports in the last 5 years. The only one. Exports mean a lot to us in Utah. And we have an excellent group of free trade people right here in Utah. I could go on and on, but the fact is that we should get rid of the capital gains tax because we should get rid of it, but we should keep it down low, because we found that you get more revenues by keeping lower rates than you do by upping them. But we ought to get rid of the death taxes. Why should families have to pay twice for something that they've earned and worked on all their lives? Why should the newspaper have to be sold because the kids can't pay the 35% death taxes? There are so many things involved here. And it would be wonderful, to borrow from Congressman Camp, it would be wonderful if we had a system where you could, one-page system where you could fill out your own returns and not have to hire accountants and lawyers and everybody else to do it, because it's a simple system that would work. We can do that, and both of us are dedicated to getting there, but we're going to have a lot of help. through the next couple of elections, and I think we need a new president of the United States as well.
We'll come back to that.
I would just want to add to a couple things that you said. One is the VAT. Every country that has a VAT also has an income tax. So while it's often discussed as an alternative to the system we have, in practicality there's always an add-on, because even if the federal government moved to that, you still have state taxes. So I don't think it's a model that works. In fact, the Senate voted on a VAT and it failed 97-0. So I don't think it's really a viable option in terms of public policy debate in this country. And also the countries that have them, they're easier to raise because in many cases it's somewhat of a hidden tax. And you have seen over recent years, they continue to grow pretty dramatically. So I don't think that would be the direction I think we should go.
I agree with that, and the consumption tax has a role. It would be wonderful if we could do it, so you'd pay taxes in accordance with what you consume. If you buy a Cadillac, you're going to pay more. If you buy a Chevy, you're going to pay less. But it's awfully hard to administer. It's going to be awfully hard to do, but it has some value. But the value-added tax, he's right. It's very easy to add taxes every time you turn around, and you don't even know it's happening to you.
As a moment of self-promotion, I did some research on the question, if you adopt a value-added tax, does it cause a country to grow a larger government? And the answer in the data is yes. And so this concern, which has been raised a lot of times, appears to be something that's consistent with the record. We know that the president just named a new economic advisor, Alan Krueger, Princeton professor, who is on record as being in favor of a VAT. Do you think that's a disqualifying position, or what do you think of the appointment in general?
Well, let me put it this way. He's an excellent economist from Princeton University who has never created a private sector job. That has been typical of this administration. I don't know of one person in this White House since it's begun who really could take much credit for creating private sector jobs. They don't understand it. And frankly, as intelligent as he may be in his specific fields of economics, I think what they needed in the White House was somebody who would say, this is how you do it. And frankly, they're also encumbered by the fact that that the unions spend $1 billion every 2 years on local, state, and federal politics. About 50 million of it is what you call hard money that has to be reported. The 950 million or thereabouts is money that they use to get out the vote primarily for Democrats. So the president is having a very difficult time. As you probably saw this last week, Richard Trumka, the head of the AFL-CIO, has come out and said, we're going to go our separate way. We're going to support people we want to. We're not going to put it through the Democratic National Committee. And so he's working to try and pacify them, and in the process, America gets short shrift. The unions are less than 7% of the private sector workforce, but they're immensely powerful, and I can't blame them for that. They've organized together to push their own agenda, but their agenda really doesn't coincide with a really good economic environment in the United States. And this is one reason why I'm saying we've got to change the presidency, and we've got to get both houses of Congress with more conservative people. And I can tell you there is not one conservative Democrat in the Senate. There's one moderate that you would truly call a moderate. Some of the others will vote more moderate from time to time, but only when their vote's not needed. But there's only one moderate. There's no conservatives. Now, the Republicans have gone pretty conservative in the Senate and the House too, so we've got to get some leadership in the White House who will function with Dave Camp and hopefully Orrin Hatch as head of the Finance Committee in the Senate, and Dave Camp, head of the Ways and Means Committee in the House, and get this stuff under control. And we're dedicated to doing that, regardless of politics, regardless of partisanship, doing it in the best interest of our country. This man over here really has his head screwed on right, and he's sincere and he's dedicated. Even the Democrats love him over in the House, most of them. We'll
find out.
Yeah, we'll find out. He says, well,
so
we're just honored to have him here.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, the president's going to give a speech after Labor Day on jobs, his 9th, I think. It's the only thing growing rapidly is presidential speeches on jobs. But what do you expect him to say, and what do you think of the kinds of proposals that we're likely to see?
Well, it's hard to know because you kind of read the tea leaves and read the press leakings and try to figure out what he's going to say. So far, I have not seen a lot new that he might suggest. It appears that he's going back to an extension of the payroll tax holiday, if you will, and some things. The concern I have with sort of taking a tax provision, whether it's corporate jets or whatever, or whether it's doing one piece of tax policy like the payroll tax, certainly it's beneficial to an individual to not have to have that deducted. But in terms of getting the economic growth, getting the fundamental comprehensive reform that we need, I don't see that moving us in that direction, which is what will get us the job growth we so desperately need. And that's the concern. I don't see this overall vision for a comprehensive approach. I understand that he may suggest an infrastructure bank, which has been suggested before. It has not gotten a political majority. People have not moved forward on that. I think simply to go over, so I hope there's something new in that, and again, we just won't know. But obviously it's something people are looking forward to hearing from. One of the things that is different about our tax system now, too, is the fact that large pieces of it expire every few months. At the end of this year, we're going to see an expiration of the research and development tax credit, which it isn't just research in white lab coats, it's innovation, so it's used all throughout our economy. And then at the end of 2012, we're going to see income tax, individual rates, estate tax, other significant parts of our tax code expire. Now, when employers from around the country come in and see me, they're looking at options. In fact, I had a company in my district that was looking at expanding, and the choices were Michigan, Tennessee, and Malaysia. I can tell you 15 years ago, Malaysia would not have been a choice. But one of the things they said to me is they were getting commitments from other governments that their taxes would be certain for 20 years, that this is what they would pay. I couldn't tell them that what the tax code would look like in 20 months. So we do have a problem with this uncertainty, and I think we need to have some consistency and continuity. So to say for a year, again, there won't be a payroll tax, or for a year we'll repeal, or for 2 years we'll repeal a provision or two, I don't think that gets you the kind of muscle you need behind the policy to really have people look at it and say, this is going to cause me to, as an employer or a group of business people, to hire that extra person or to build that building or to do the kinds of big decisions that we need to have made to start really getting economic development and growth and jobs happening again.
One of these you mentioned was Dodd-Frank and regulation of the American economy. And the president has made a great play recently about taking regulations off the books and announced a big initiative on that. What is your take on his success in lowering the regulatory burden?
The regulatory burden has exploded under his administration, and it's going to explode into hundreds of thousands of pages from Obamacare and Dodd-Frank. And he talks that way, but it never happens. And there's a reason. They actually believe, sincerely believe, that the federal government is the last answer to everything. And there's a good reason why they have such support. I just mentioned 51% of all households don't pay income taxes. Do you realize 23 million people get refundable tax credits that are more than they pay in payroll taxes, which is Social Security? They have a stake in building the federal government at the cost of everything else. And there's a political method in that madness too, because the more they believe the federal government is the last answer to everything, and we all know it isn't in Utah, but the more they believe that, the people out there, the more they're going to vote for one party.
There was a report issued on IRS improper payments, what they called improper payments. Some of that's fraud, and some of that's the IRS sent it to the wrong place. $80 billion over 10 years, because the IRS is not a good check writing agency. That's why I think we need to relook at how those programs work. Certainly, if you're working and have low income, there's probably not going to be tax liability there under any proposal that I've seen. But the way this is structured is not there's a high degree of erroneous payment. I think of that $80 billion. My sense is there is a significant amount of fraud in that. The IRS has not broken that down for us, but that's where I think we need to look at it. And the idea that you receive more from the IRS than you pay in both payroll and income is not a good policy. It's not a good direction, because there are other agencies that are more, if there is a safety net issue, there are other agencies that are better equipped to deal with that, certainly, than the IRS. They're not a good check writing agency. They don't do it well, and we need to.
This has always been. I have always thought this has been the underappreciated Achilles heel of Obamacare. The notion is that the IRS, in conjunction with HHS, can each month look out among the 300 million Americans, identify those who are eligible for the subsidy, calculate their subsidy correctly, send it to their current state of residence, an insurance company of their choice for the product they want, and not make mistakes.
They can't do it.
Right, that was what I was hoping you'd say.
Simply, they cannot do it.
So I want to turn the discussion to the spending issue. And I want to ask you to just talk about this idea that somehow the only way we can grow is to spend more, and by cutting government spending, we're imperiling the recovery. And then I wanted you to discuss the much touted Joint Select Committee in Congress and what its plans might be.
Well, the last 3 or 4 stimulus programs, one under Bush 2, W, and 3 under this president, 2 or 3 under this president, they've been busts. The last one was $1 trillion. And I have to say, one of the reasons it's a bust is because they're trying to find ways to give money to their constituents, to their supporters. And that isn't the way to do it. One reason why the president's going to call for more infrastructure development and spending on bridges and roads is because many of those companies are unionized. Now, I think that's something I wish we could do, but it could be done in far better free market ways than the way the president's doing. I am glad that the president seems to be backing away from creating a new Department of Jobs or new Department of Competition. If they do that infrastructure bank, that's the new Fannie and Freddie of the banking industry. You can just rely on it. That's what happens when you do things like that. What I prefer to see, and I believe my 2 friends here would agree, I prefer to see incentives given to the private sector, and especially the small business sector. And one of the problems with the president's desire to tax the upper income people is that there's 750 to 800,000 small businesses that would be hit hard that are usually pass-through companies. In other words, subchapter F companies or subchapter S companies, excuse me, or partnerships, et cetera. Pass-through entities where the owners generally put the money back into the business to be able to hire more people, to expand their businesses, and to get things going. Well, right now, they're all holding on to their monies because they don't know what they're going to be hit with next. And there's an uncertainty in our financial system today that is making it very, very difficult for banks to lend, for people to even borrow. And well, I could go on, you could talk about this for hours, but I have to say, we have to break through these things, and it's going to take, it seems to me the way to break through is to start getting back to the free market, start getting people who are competitive, who have competitive instincts to fight and work to resolve some of the economic problems that we have right now. But it takes good economic leadership. And again, I'll come back to the White House. Look, I'm not just trying to be harsh here. I don't know if anybody there has ever created a private sector job. And if you haven't done that, how in the world can you come in here and dictate to the country how to increase jobs? And everything they suggest is more federal government. And it's easy to see why. That means more power to them.
So the key moment for scaling back government that is at hand is the so-called Joint Select Committee. And so this is largely a mysterious operation to most people. Could you spend 5 minutes saying sort of what it's supposed to do, and then we can talk a little bit about how it impacts tax reform and entitlement reform?
Sure. The recent discussion on the debt ceiling, there was the Budget Control Act passed, which was a bipartisan vote, created this committee of 12, equal numbers of House members and senators, equal numbers of Republicans and Democrats, 12 total, and a requirement that there be a simple majority. So most committees out there don't operate in an equal number. And so that is a different structure, and I think recognizing the inability to move forward on the need, certainly, to reduce our debt and deficit. And the committee was given the charge of reducing the debt by between $1.2 and $1.5 trillion, and everything is measured over a 10-year period. And it's all measured by the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, which is a nonpartisan arm of the Congress, which Doug was the chair of a few years back. But that is how we evaluate every proposal that will come forward. What does CBO say this impact will have on the deficit? There are two things that are different as well, because you might say, well, gee, haven't they had enough of these commissions or special committees? This one actually has legislative authority. The other commissions, I did serve on the Simpson-Bowles Debt Commission. The president ignored those findings. That report got basically put on a shelf. This committee actually will bring legislation to the Congress. It's guaranteed in the bill. And it will be an expedited procedure so that there won't be any procedural holdups to bring the bill to the floor. The other issue that's important to know is if we don't get to at least $1.2 trillion in debt reduction by November 23rd, which is when we need to vote, so that really means the committee needs to be done sort of later October. That means there'll be across-the-board reductions. And some of the entitlement programs are exempt from those across-the-board reductions. So that means that the cuts will fall mainly on what we call domestic discretionary. Those are things we vote on every year, the national parks, issues like that, and defense. So both Republicans and Democrats believe, I think, there's a working majority of people who believe that those across-the-board cuts would be the worst alternative. So I think that will be an incentive to meet. Our first meeting, I believe, will be next week. I think it's still being set. We're required to meet by mid-September. We'll certainly meet that first initial date. I think they're in the process. The chairs are from Texas, Jeb Hensarling, and Senator Patty Murray from Washington State, one Republican, one Democrat. I will say this, the chief staff director was just hired, and he came right from Senator Hatch's staff. He is Senator's chief tax person, will be the staff director of this Joint Select Committee. And so I think that's a real testament to the quality of person that Senator Hatch has working for him and the expertise that he will bring, and that will obviously make an important impact on how we move forward in the Joint Select Committee.
And more generally, in the process by which the committee will operate, both the Senate Finance Committee and the Ways and Means Committee will provide to this Joint Select Committee their suggestions. And since these are the committees that have the standing expertise in Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the substance of economic growth, I think you're going to see a big role for both. And I guess I wanted to ask you, if you just had your choice, what would you do on Medicaid reform? I know you've worked with the Republican governors extensively, and Utah has had experience with this. What do you think is the future of Medicaid, and what do we need to do?
Medicaid is costing the states about a quarter of their revenue, their income, and it's killing them in a lot of ways, and especially with all of the regulations and mandates by the federal government. So in this particular case, I worked with another committee over in the House because Dave's committee does not have Medicaid under its jurisdiction. And our goal would be to give the states the flexibility and the control over Medicaid within the confines of the states and within the demographics of their own population. And we've been working very closely with the Republican Governors Association to try and resolve these problems, and they've pretty well agreed with what we've suggested about giving the states more flexibility and giving the states more control over Medicaid, and they'll make it work better. It won't be over-regulated, which always happens with the federal government, more and more regulations rather than how do you do it better. And I think there are a significant number of Democrat governors who've chatted with me too, who can't surface right now on it for real reasons, who basically hope that that's what's going to happen. Now, there's a significant number of Democrat governors who don't want that to happen because they're used to living off of what the federal government gives them. In this particular case, we'd have far better governance if the states had control over the monies and had less intrusion and less demands by the federal government that eat up all kinds of funds just with the over-regulatory nature of the federal government.
The other point,
I like you over there.
well, the other point on Medicaid, which it was expanded by a third in the health care bill, and the federal government for a few years will be paying 100% of Medicaid. Medicaid is a shared program between the states and federal government. Right. And after a few years, what's going to happen? Well, the states then have to pick up that share. This was the so-called Cornhusker kickback, which was initially going to only apply to Nebraska and Florida, ended up being then applied to all the states, where the federal government, it means the U.S. taxpayer, is paying for all of the expansion of Medicaid. Right. But then where are the states going to be left after this? This is another reason why simply expanding an existing entitlement without the kind of patient-centered reforms we need to see is another reason why health care needs to be repealed. The federal government
can't pick up the costs.
No.
I mean, there's not the money there. So they've saddled with the states with all these costs,
right, and
yet saddled them with all kinds of over-regulatory provisions that make it very difficult to manage. It just isn't going to work the way our friends on the other side have wanted it to work.
So, well, we're talking about big money and we're talking about health. Let's talk about Medicare for a second. At the moment, payroll taxes and seniors' premiums go into Medicare, and payments to doctors and other providers go out. And the gap, most people don't realize, is $280 billion a year. That's the red ink in Medicare. That's how much it's taking from the general revenue and borrowing at the moment. For each of you, whoever gets to go first, what do we do with Medicare? And how do we get this done?
Yeah, you want me to?
Yeah.
Well, the problem that Doug outlined is that Medicare goes broke in 2024, which is 5 years earlier than last year's prediction. And this is from the Medicare trustees. It's not just my number. And that is a real concern because when you're talking about seniors' health, you need a long-term time to plan. And that means that we have a very significant problem. I think that we do need to reform Medicare. I do think it needs to be done in a bipartisan way, but I think simply reducing the payments to providers, which is what the health care bill did, is not really savings. And what you're going to do is ultimately impact the quality of the care seniors receive. So I think we need to look at the kind of innovation in health care that you saw Medicare Advantage doing, which is Medicare, but it really gives a patient-centered plan, which is the direction that medicine's trying to go, and it really is modeled after Part D, the prescription drug benefit for seniors, where you have private plans competing for seniors' care. I think that's the direction of the future. That's the direction we should go. It's worked in Part D. There's 90% satisfaction by seniors in Part D. Part D has come in under the costs that were predicted. It gives the innovation and flexibility. And one of the problems with the approach of the health care bill that Senator Hatch has outlined so well is that they're going to lock in regulation the way Medicare is delivered. And to innovate and change, which we all know medicine is doing dramatically. I mean, I meet with physicians and nurse anesthetists, and just in even my small town of 50,000 people, there was just a brand new outpatient surgery center built. There's just a different way of delivering care now than has historically been. And the regulation will lock in really almost a 1960s model of healthcare when we need to have that flexibility. That's why the competing private plans, as they are in Part D, I think is the direction we need to go.
Well, and we found that the Part D has worked better than we thought it would work.
Yeah.
Medicare Advantage really has helped millions of senior citizens.
The reason I'm laughing is I was at the CBO when the Part D program went in place, and we estimated the cost at $395 billion over 10 years, not that I remember. It came in 30% below that, and I don't want to hear about it anymore.
We just wanted to prove to you that you federal guys don't know what you're doing. But he does know what he's doing. I'm just kidding. But let me just say that Medicare Advantage worked very well. But what did they do in Obamacare? They took $500 billion out of Medicare Advantage and put it in another unsustainable new entitlement program. I mean, my gosh. If you're going to take it out of there, I would have rather fixed the doctor's problem, the SGR, which at that time was $280 billion. Today it's approaching $400 billion.
Yes.
And frankly, we're going to have to fix that, or doctors aren't going to take Medicare patients. It's just that simple. And some doctors won't take them now because of what they consider low reimbursement rates. But many doctors do, but it's a problem to us.
Well, and as you know, they promised they'd fix the so-called doctor payment problem in the health care bill and did not deliver on that. And as you know, our version of health care had a 4-year payment for physicians to give us time to find a new model for what's called the SGR, or the doctor payment problem in Medicare. So we had a 4-year proposal that would have given us the time then to go back and really listen to physicians to find out what was the best way to deal with that issue.
That's right. The SGR was the shortfall that doctors were promised but didn't get paid, or at least thought they were promised and didn't get paid. So it's a real problem, and they just keep putting it off, and doctors are getting madder and madder, and it's a mess.
Well, again, it's another area where it's fixed every year.
Yeah.
There's a threat of a significant cut, and so for physicians that run offices that are businesses as well,
right. They can't plan.
How do they plan? How do they imagine having that uncertainty? So again, it's continual uncertainty that we need to address. We really need to get some long-term solutions in place.
Right. Now you're noticing this word, quote, uncertainty, unquote, is across the board. Anytime that you pass a bill that is 100% partisan, that affects, as Obamacare does, 1/6 of the American economy, and it's totally partisan, you can just bet your bottom dollar that that's a bad bill. And I'm telling you, it's one of the worst bills in the history of this country, and I hate to tell you this, I think Dodd-Frank is even worse from its economic impact on America.
The moderator's job is a lot like Casablanca. I just round up the usual suspects. So to complete the tour, where are we headed on Social Security? And I know both of you have bills and have done work on private pension reform. Can we fix Social Security without also fixing the private pensions and the saving problem in America?
Go ahead, Dave.
Well, I think that Social Security has some real long-term unsustainability to it. We've got 10,000 baby boomers retiring a day, and fewer workers. It's a program that was designed where the current workers would support the existing retirees, and for good reasons. People are living longer. It's not sustainable. There is a path forward on Social Security. Again, I think that needs to be a bipartisan path forward. There are some things that could be done that would address, I think, some of the inequities at the lower end of the scale, look at those at the higher end of the scale as well, and try to get at least a sustainability for 75 years. I think that is important to do, and it should be done, but it's one of those issues that is so politically powerful that whoever steps out and tries to do it. So I'm hopeful this is an issue that we can talk about in the Joint Select Committee, that there will be bipartisan support to do something, because we do need to make sure these promises are promises that can be kept for the long term. And again, with Social Security, even more than Medicare, you need to look 75 years ahead. It's not just the next 5 years or the next 10 years. You really need to have a 75-year actuarial soundness to the system. We do not have that now. It's already spending more than it brings in. That's not a good path or trajectory to be on for any long-term program. But obviously, it's an important part of the safety net, social safety net in America. We do need to preserve it. We need to protect it. But if we do nothing, that means that over time it will continue to erode as a benefit and ultimately will fall under its own weight.
Last time I heard, Social Security is about $17 or $18 trillion in unfunded liability. And it really could be in real jeopardy if we don't do some. It's not as bad off as Medicaid and Medicare. And it can be fixed. And I'll just, some people think the word compromise is a terrible word. But it's a word, and Dave, Congressman Camp, he made a very important point. He said this has got to take Republicans and Democrats working together with a good president. Hopefully Obama will be a great president on this issue. But you're going to have presidential leadership as well. And the last time Social Security was fixed was when Ragan and Tip O'Neill got together. Now Ragan didn't get everything he wanted because Tip O'Neill got more spending. But Ragan got a marginal tax rate reductions of 25% over 3 years. That was less than he had asked for. I know I was one of the leaders for that back in 1981, 82, 83. And I went all over the country on what was called the Kemp-Roth bill. We wanted 30%. And frankly, he got 25%. It was less than what he wanted, but he also held down spending that wouldn't have been held down. And between these two people, one, a very liberal Democrat, who was a great leader, Tip O'Neill, who got together with his Irish friend, and they really disagreed on almost everything, Ronald Reagan, both Irish, and they both had to compromise. They didn't go that far, but they went that far. And it saved Social Security up until just recently. Now, what Congressman Camp is saying is that we know some things that we can do. When Social Security first came out, the life expectancy wasn't many years after you qualified. Today, if you reach age 74 in relatively good health, you're going to live to age 90. And that means if people got on at 65, age 65, and they lived to age 90, that's a lot longer than anybody had planned to make the payoffs on Social Security. But it has to be done. But there are ways of doing it. Some think that those on the highest level get too much. Others think those on the lowest level ought to be given a better index to get them up a little bit faster. I'm one of those. And some believe we should increase the age that you come on. But everybody, virtually everybody, agrees that those 55 years or older should not have any real basic changes in Social Security. But what we're concerned with are our children, grandchildren, and Elaine in my case, great-grandchildren. It is not true, however, that I was there when Lincoln gave his Gettysburg Address. I just want you all to know that.
So, I think we're going to get a chance to turn to the audience questions, but while we're doing that, I just wanted to sort of get your reflections on the debate and the way that it'll play out. Because we know that if you discuss these cuts to Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security reforms, however you want to characterize it, the accusation will be that the poor are bearing all the burden of reining in the debt, that it isn't a shared sacrifice or balanced approach. How do you respond to that, and how do you get this done? Will the committee work, or is there a way to get this done outside the Joint Select Committee?
Well, I think we do need to address entitlements in the Select Committee. I don't know how you get to $1.2 trillion in debt reduction without having that be part of it. I just don't know how you get there. So again, if we don't do that, there'll be these across-the-board cuts, and again, I think that'll be devastating. I don't think that's the direction we want to go. So I do think they will be part of it. I'm hopeful also there will be a growth aspect to what we try to do in the committee. I think tax reform might be one of those areas that both Senator Hatch and I have worked on, that I think that is one way we can get the economy moving. And I've mentioned new markets and trade and other things. But the regulatory burden is significant, and it's hard to get talked about. And I know that we might be able to do something, but again, I don't want to. We have 12 people that have about 60 days to try to do some things, and not everything is going to be able to be done in that Select Committee, but we do need to highlight those problems, and hopefully we can address some of them.
It is an interesting committee, and I'm really pleased that Congressman Camp is on it. We have 3 good Republicans in the Senate, 3 solid Democrats in the Senate, and the same in the House. And it's no secret that the Ways and Means Committee is going to have to weigh in and do some of the research and work. The Finance Committee is going to have to weigh in and do some of the research and work and make suggestions. Dave was kind enough to mention Mark Prater, who is my top tax advisor. who is, I think, the best on Capitol Hill, and a very, very solid, decent man who doesn't get into politics. And he's not stupid, but he knows that there's some things where you have to manipulate politics from time to time. But we're going to work together, and I am just thrilled that he's on that committee, because I have every confidence in the world in Dave Camp. He's solid, dependable, strong. He's bipartisan. Comes from a state that's quite evenly split between Republicans and Democrats, and he'll be one of the real people making that system work. I hope they can do it, because if they can't, the Defense Department would be devastated, and it would be awful.
And other discretionary spending.
Yeah, and discretionary spending, which is a small part of the budget, but relatively important.
Very important.
Yeah, very important.
So I have less than 15 minutes left. Let me try to get through a couple of the ones that,
Sure.
that folks came. First, and you mentioned this, how can Congress rein in regulations and policies of departments that are bypassing the Congress?
I think you're going to see on regulations, at least in the House this fall, an attempt to try to highlight and repeal some of those. We have legislation called the REINS Act, which says any regulation that has a significant economic impact should be voted on in the Congress. So I think you're going to see this fall as really trying to highlight that issue, and I think the
That'd
Senate
be
will
great.
be as well.
An audience member asked specifically for you, Senator Hatch, how specifically do you plan to get the U.S. to zero baseline budgeting?
That's a tough question. I think it's going to take pretty much unity among Republicans to get there. And that means having a Republican president, Dave Camp as head of the Ways and Means Committee, and I as chairman of the Finance Committee. If we could get that, and we can have enough people help us, I think we can get it out of politics and really do what's in the best interest of our country. And keep in mind, when I was mentioning about the unions, what a tremendous force they are in the Democratic Party, and financial force. They have a right to do that. And the Democrats have a right to understand that they do it. But because of that, they are big government personified. And it's going to take people who literally can recognize that government has its role, but it shouldn't be all embracive. This man over here recognizes that, I recognize that, and I believe if we can get the right Republican president, we would have a force for good, and I think we'd find some of our Democrat colleagues who would work with us, because they would realize that, hey, it's time to change, it's time to get this straightened out. I don't see it happening if President Obama is reelected. And look, I don't dislike President Obama as a person. He's charismatic, he's congenial, he's smart, he's articulate, all of those things, but he's never worked in the private sector, and I just don't think he understands it. And he does understand that without doing what less than 7% of the private workforce wants him to do, but a huge percentage of the federal workforce wants him to do, the unions, he isn't going to get reelected anyway. So we've got to get it to where these huge special interests don't control what happens. And I don't want to sound like I'm anti-union or anything else. I was raised in the union movement, learned a trade, held a card in the AFL-CIO, was a skilled tradesman. And there's a place, but I think it's going to take conservatives to straighten this mess out. And like I say, I don't see many conservatives. There are no conservatives in the Senate. There are a few conservative Democrats in the House.
Question from the audience on growth. Would rescinding the Obama health care plan stimulate or hurt the nation's economy?
Well, I think ultimately will help. I mean, obviously much of the bill doesn't come into force until 2014, but there are pieces of it coming in all these years. I think the regulatory burden, the idea that the IRS is going to oversee whether you've got acceptable health care or not, that now what is a qualified health plan will be defined by the HHS department, that you're going to have the Independent Payment Advisory Board determine what is an eligible payment for health care. I just see a bureaucratic overlay that is not going to deliver higher quality care in a more cost-effective way to patients. And I think you're going to continue to see then providers pull out and then make it very, very difficult. So I think that will help our economy, because the regulatory uncertainty is really causing a lot of economic effects. It's really preventing, I think, a lot of growth from occurring.
We have a very Utah-specific question for you. Representative Chaffetz recently asked that Utah's representatives in Washington have a weekly meeting to, quote, get on the same page. Do you think this will be beneficial to your constituents, and how would it help the delegates from Utah?
We don't have weekly meetings, but we do call delegation meetings in my office when important issues to Utah come up. I've brought generals in, I've brought top administration people in, I've brought top authorities in, and we've had a pretty darn good delegation meetings. Now, and as you read in the paper, even Congressman Matheson comes regularly, and so do the others regularly. And every one of them said these are effective meetings. And we don't want to, we're all busy, so we don't want to waste time just having meetings. We want to have reasons to help our state, resolve state problems, and those meetings we do. And we bring in the top people from the government come in at my request and chat with us and listen to us, and sometimes we're able to turn them. It's one of the ways that we've been able to save a lot of federal programs in Utah that do work. Hill Air Force Base is one where we work on it continuously. And I have to say that, you know, that's more Senator Lee's and my role and Congressman Bishop's role than it is the other members of the delegation, but all have to be concerned because it's one of the biggest employers in the state. So, yeah, we have delegation meetings. They've been good, and but you have to be there to, to participate. And I have to say, most of them are there.
So we have someone who wants some bottom line answers. Is it possible to continue as we are fiscally without a complete economic meltdown? This sounds like a yes or no question.
I'll say no.
I don't think we can continue on the path we're on.
No, that's right.
So I would endorse that. Now,
and I think the Congress recognized that by creating this committee to cut another $1.2 trillion off the debt.
Now, in contrast to some who complain about the situation and offer no solutions, this participant wants to know, what do you think of the following? A 10 or 12% federal flat tax, and entitlement reform that raises the retirement age to 70, means tests Social Security and Medicare, and eliminates Obamacare?
Well, there are a lot of good suggestions there, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd have to really examine them closely and make sure that there aren't loose ends, but there's some good suggestions.
I don't want to be flippant. I like the approach on all of those issues.
Me too.
The direction that the suggestion is on all those issues.
Right.
So this question is, what can we do as a nation to prepare for the reality of a global economy and of contracting economies worldwide? And what provisions can we put in place to deal with this contraction while at the same time providing for our aging population? So we're going to have demographic aging here and elsewhere so that we have a vibrant economy tomorrow. What's the key to making that transition?
Well, I think some of those things we've talked about today, and I don't want to hit on all of them, but I believe fundamental tax reform. I think that if we can obviously address that, move forward on creating more exports, we do need to reduce the debt. The debt is about 100% of our economy now. That's preventing our economy from growing. That's translating into a lack of jobs. So I think those are the key areas. And you mentioned regulation and
on a territorial system on
trade. Yes, moving. When I think on the agreements, clearly changing our international tax policy, as well as Senator Hatch mentioned, on moving from this worldwide system of taxation to a territorial system. Our international tax was created in the 50s, when the U.S. was the home base to most international companies. Well, we've had a lot of changes since then. First of all, there's been a number of emerging and emergent have emerged economies, so that we're not dealing with the same kind of world landscape that they were when they created the code during the Cold War. So we've got to change that in terms of our ability to compete. And that's not an exhaustive list. Those are just some highlights.
For you, Senator Hatch, who would you vote for as our next president and why? And the answer cannot be Dave Camp.
You know how to shove it to us, don't you? No, I've been known to be a strong supporter of Mitt Romney for the last 4 years, and I'll tell you why. I think almost any of our candidates on our side would do a better job than's being done today, and that's I hate to say it that way because I don't want to act like I'm running down President Obama. But we have a different philosophy, there's no question about it. What we need more than anything else is somebody who understands the economy, who understands how do you create jobs, who understands the free market system, who basically is willing to lead to cut down over-regulatory approaches towards everything, who basically has the energy and the ability to get things done. We in Utah, we saw him come in here. Our Olympics were in terrible shape. There were allegations of fraud, mismanagement, even criminal allegations. They weren't accurate, but they were there. We were stopped. We couldn't raise the money. We couldn't get the track system done. We couldn't do a lot of things. It was going to be the biggest eyesore in the history of the Olympic movement. Mitt Romney came in and almost overnight turned that whole thing around by bringing in the best financial people. He didn't do it all himself. He knew enough about the economy and how to do it to bring in the best financial people. And he turned that around, and we wind up with the best Winter Olympics in history and more than $100 million surplus in the end. He did the same thing up in Massachusetts. They were $3 billion in debt when billions were a big thing. Today it's trillions. We need somebody like that, and I believe he would be the best. Now, if Mitt, for some reason, couldn't make it, I'd like to see another fellow Utahn, John Huntsman, have a shot at it. But they are two very different people, and both of them have qualities that would recommend them. But I do believe that Mitt would make a tremendous difference. But I know every one of them. They're good people, they're honest people, they're conservative by and large, and they believe in this country. And I will support whoever comes through, but I'm hoping that Mitt makes it, because I do believe that it would make a difference at this particular time in our country's history when it has to be made.
Thank you.
No, wait, I didn't hear yours.
I haven't endorsed a candidate yet.
Okay.
I'm still looking. But I should add that
he's smarter than I am, because they're all going to be after him as head of the Ways and Means Committee,
I just haven't endorsed
and with good reason. He's a very powerful person, and plus being a very honest and good person.
So this next question says, as a citizen of this great country, what are some things that we can do as individuals to help our country through this financial mess we find our nation in?
Well, I think it's just important, you're all here participating, and I think that's important. And we've seen a lot of people come forward in the last year or two, many of them in my area say, I wasn't involved in politics before, I just sort of let that happen, and I was busy with my life. And now things are so important that I want to be part of what's happening. So I think the participation is huge. Continue to however form that takes, whether it's joining a group or getting online and chatting, and really trying to make a difference in that way. Continue to keep, both at the local, state, and federal level, keep all policymakers on their toes. Our system works better the more people that are involved. So I guess I think on that sense. And then I do think that each person can make a difference. You were talking about one vote in on the balanced budget amendment. We had a congressional race in my district that initially was reported to have been determined in the primary by one vote. They did a recount. It was actually 11 votes out of more than 100,000 cast. So don't underestimate what you can do, and I think in a general sense, participate to the fullest extent you can. Obviously, we're all trying to work hard. We're all trying to make sure we do the right thing in terms of our communities and at home and in our own budgets. But I think obviously being involved on making public policy is something people can really help with.
We are running out of time, but Senator, you want to have some closing thoughts on the topic?
No, that's fine. I think I agree with Dave on what he's saying. Get involved. You know, we'd love to have you involved in our campaign, but if not, go with the other. I think it's important that we all participate, and you folks are good examples of people who participate and want to learn more and want to hear these great people like Dave Camp. I think it's, and I might add, this wonderful economist who is clearly one of the best in the world.
And I just want to say that if the Senate were to change, Senator Hatch would be the chairman of the Finance Committee, and that obviously would be very helpful in terms of addressing all the issues we've talked today, because that's exactly somebody then who I could work closely with on issues, and I think we see many issues the same way, and I think that would be an important thing, certainly for Utah, certainly for our country at this time. And I look forward to working with you, whatever role you have in the Senate Finance Committee. But our committees are all going to be really doing the backup for the Joint Select Committee, because right now we have one staff person on the Joint Select Committee. Maybe we'll have two. There might be just a couple. But in terms of really doing the work on all these policy issues that we're going to be dealing with, thank you for the work that I know Senate Finance is going to be doing on that in the months ahead, and I look forward to continuing to work with you.
I feel exactly the same way. I just feel it's a privilege to know Dave Camp and to work with him, and we have a good relationship. As you can see, he's very sincere, dedicated, dignified, and is putting country first over politics, and to me, that's what we've got to do.
Well, I want to thank everyone for coming, for their questions. I want to apologize for those who had questions that we didn't get to, and I do hope you'll join me in thanking both of these gentlemen for their thoughts and observations today.
Senator Hatch, again, thank you for organizing this event over the past few years and this year. Dr. Holtz-Eakin, thank you for making the dismal sciences lively today. And Chairman Camp, it's an honor to have you here in Utah. Come back and ski. We may have an adjunct professorship open for you. We can work out a lot of things. So before I excuse these gentlemen, we're going to usher them off the stage for a press conference. And then I'll make an announcement after that about a reception. But before we do that, one more round of applause for them.